your core funding of 1.725 million for the upcoming financial year, a significant uplift on your core funding from the current financial year. And I think this is the important bit for me. This is in recognition of all the great work that you've done supporting the government's objectives in the South East, the way in which you've worked collaboratively with the Department of Transport and our delivery bodies and as a supportive partner. So I think all of our efforts, collective efforts, have been recognised. And I know, we're one of 7 STBs now, but I just, obviously I'll respond to Baroness Veer, but I just think that's really great for us to receive today. So it's put a sparkle in my eye and hopefully some of yours. And I know Rupert will come to the detail in the finance department, but Rupert, do you want to add something now?
Yeah, just to say, I'm obviously delighted, Keith, to have the letter. I think significantly, it also sets out a projection of funding over 3 years. So not only the 1.725 million for 22-23, but it sets out a projection of 2.065 million for 23-24 and 2.248 million for 24-25. Now we all know that multi-year funding settlements are like hen's teeth. So to have something that sets out an indicative funding allocation for the following financial years, I think is really positive. And I think, to my mind, it just shows that the department sees us as a credible body, and it's really positive news. As always, there's a little bit more detail within the letter, but we will circulate that round to board members and their officers following the meeting. What I would say, Keith, is of course the finance paper. We had hoped to be in a position to present this out and ask you to agree a budget, because we were waiting for this and we didn't want to put a budget in front of you, with lots of scenarios, because we knew this was coming. But it does mean that the finance paper is just a reflection of where we are year to date, rather than asking you to set a budget. We do need to do that, and subject to board members' views, our proposal would be to set out a budget for the year virtually to you, and then have that ratified at the May meeting. It just enables us to enter the financial year with you having notionally agreed a budget, which I think is constitutionally the appropriate thing to do, and then you can ratify that, assuming you're all in agreement to have an extraordinary board meeting in May at the May meeting.
Thank you for that. I think we'll take that into account as we go through the agenda. But thank you. And as I say, another major genuine step forward for TFSE. So we're back to today's agenda, which is agenda item 2, which is the minutes from the previous meeting. So the minutes have been circulated. So I'm looking to seek approval from members for the minutes of the Partnership Board held on 24th of January 2022. Is that agreed? Take that as a yes. There's no.
Agreed.
We then come to declarations of interest. Are there any additional declarations that anyone wished to raise? Again, none. Thank you. Agenda item 4, statement from the public. There is no Partnership Board. There is no statements that have been requested for the public for this meeting. That again. We'll then move on to agenda item 5, which is the lead officer's report. And Rupert, I'll hand over to you, please.
Thank you. So I won't stay for too long on this. You've had an update, or you're aware of where we are in terms of the strategic investment plan and the area studies. But in addition to that, we do work collaboratively with the 6 other STBs in England. And we recently established meetings with the chief officers of those STBs to identify areas of collaboration to ensure that we're speaking with a single voice as a collective to the DFT. That's proving quite fruitful. In terms of events over the period, the Parliamentary Reception went extremely well with both Baroness Veer doing a keynote there, and Hugh Merriman, the Transport Select Committee Chair, hosting that for us. And there's been a couple of other smaller items as well. The APPG for the South East held an evidence session on what levelling up means. We had a Transport Planning Society webinar, picking up decarbonisation and economic growth. And Localis have done some work with us around understanding what resetting the South East might be, particularly in a post-COVID world. We've now got the outcome of our CSR submission. I have to say that next year's funding allocation is only just shy of the 1.8 million that we sought within the comprehensive spending review. And when we come back to you, when we set out a budget and come back to you potentially in May, we'll be mapping out what that funding achieves in terms of the CSR submission and subsequent business planning for the year. So I'll stop there, Chairman.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments for Rupert? None showing. So you've got the recommendation there in front of you. Are we all happy to agree? Note the activities of Transport for the South East between January.
Great.
Yeah. Thank you. So we'll move on to agenda item 6, the financial update. And Rachel, I think you're going to introduce.
Yes, thank you, Chair. The paper that's been circulated with the pack is it requires some updating in light of the very welcome news that we've just received. But if I start by maybe just talking through the year-to-date figures to the end of February 22, and that's very much as set out in Appendix 1 in the report pack and with the detail that's included in the report. Just to highlight a couple of key areas within the report. We have year-to-date expenditure on the technical programme, and there is actually a typo here in paragraph 2.3. Apologies. That should say that the year-to-date expenditure on the technical programme amounts to just under 1.05 million, not the 1.5 million that's in the report, and that's mainly on the area studies, future mobility strategy, and the freight and logistics strategy. There are a number of work streams which have commenced in the current financial year, including the area studies and the strategic investment plan, that will not conclude until next financial year, and the residual budget for those pieces of work will be carried forward and ring-fenced for their completion. Board members will recall that at the last partnership board meeting, we announced that TFSE had been awarded some additional in-year funding, £700,000 to support activity against 4 areas, which was decarbonisation, buses, EV charging infrastructure strategy, and local capability. The procurement for these work streams is currently underway, but work is not going to commence until next financial year, and therefore we are proposing that the budget is carried forward and ring-fenced into next financial year. We're currently forecasting that there'll be 1.2 million spent from the technical programme by the end of March, but that is subject to change as we sort of go through the next few days towards the end of financial year. Few areas where the budget, where our spend is going to be slightly lower than the initial budget. That includes staffing costs, operational expenses, and communications and engagement activity. And the reasons for that are set out in paragraph 2.6. We're proposing that we are likely to carry forward just over 1.5 million of technical programme funding, which is for the SIP and the recently awarded 4 work streams. As mentioned, that will be ring-fenced and will be presented in the 22-23 budget. There's a further carry forward projected of £209,000, which will be used to support the delivery of the technical programme in the next 12 months. The final thing just to highlight on the year-to-date position is that we are maintaining a small reserve. We've done this for a number of years, and we are proposing to carry forward 341,000 at the end of March 22, although that does include a ring-fenced amount of 97,000, which covers the costs associated with 2 fixed-term posts, which is currently funded through DFT grant funding. That gives us a base reserve of £244,000 that we are proposing to take forward. We will be finalising the accounts over the next few weeks, and we are intending to present the final end of year figures at the next board meeting. And as Rupert's highlighted, if agreed, that would be in May, at the beginning of May, as an extraordinary board meeting. Rupert's already provided an update on number 3 here, which is the grant funding for 22-23, and we've just received the very welcome news that we have a grant settlement for the next financial year and indicative funding allocations for 23-24 and 24-25. If board members are in agreement, we would like to propose that we circulate a budget for 22-23 virtually for agreement, but then look to bring along a 3-year budget proposal to the extraordinary board meeting in May if that is agreed. We would also look to bring a multi-year business plan along to the board meeting in the extraordinary board meeting if that is agreed. I will then, unless Rupert's got anything more to say on the grant funding allocation, I'll hand over to Holly to talk through the annual report, which is included in the pack.
Thank you, Holly.
Thank you. Yeah, within the pack you have got a first draft of the annual report, and board members will notice that there are some sections missing because we were waiting for the funding announcement, so we'll be able to update those now. In the version that we've shared with you, alongside that there is also a fully accessible web version that we have created on the website, so that will be ready to be published upon your approval. But yes, we'd like to seek your agreement to the annual report that you've been presented in your board pack.
Thank you. But any other comments or questions? Goodness. Oh, I can see a hand somewhere. Where am I?
Okay, might be
Dan,
me.
sorry, yeah, no, I can see you now, Dan. I'm back on the right screen. Carry on.
Right, plenty of us on this call. Thanks, Rachel. If I've understood correctly, the area studies we were doing, I think they had a £450,000 budget, and it looks like, you know, they are kind of partly spent in the budget here. But my understanding is the area studies are finished now because we're moving on to the SIP. So with the unspent monies, for those area studies, which I think there is, if I understand correctly, what's the kind of proposal for the unspent money? Is that to kind of progress some of the interventions in those area studies kind of further?
I will clarify on that because the area studies, and I noticed that Sarah's come online and Sarah might want to come in here. The way that the area studies have been presented has been a little bit complex in terms of budget reporting, because we had the 5 area studies, which totalled a budget of just under 1.8 million in total for the 5 area studies. And they actually started last financial year and have progressed at different paces. So the way that we worked the funding was we broke it down into the 5 lines, which you can see in Appendix 1. Some of the spend happened in the previous financial year, so in 2020-2021, and then what we've done is we've sort of carried on progressing with those 5 area studies throughout this financial year. We are looking to carry forward the underspend at the minute because the area studies, although they are coming to an end, they haven't quite concluded. We haven't got the final reports and we haven't paid the final invoices, so we're proposing to carry forward. I think I can't remember the figure off the top of my head how much we're going to be carrying forward, but I think it's about 500,000 that we're carrying forward, and the majority of that is already allocated for spend next year to finish off the area studies. That will conclude by middle of May, so you should see that by the middle of May that money will be off our books, and we will then be sort of progressing with the SIP, but there's actually going to be very little underspend from the initial £1.8 million that we had allocated for the area studies.
Okay, thanks, Rachel.
Apologies for that. It's not been the most straightforward in terms of reporting with the area studies because they have spanned a number of years, and yeah, it's been a little bit more complex than we hoped.
Understood.
Good question, thank you, Dan. Any other questions or comments? Okay. So we're just going to be told. So the recommendations are there. You don't really need me to read them out, but are we happy to agree the recommendations as printed? Yep. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you. So we move on to agenda item 7, which is the governance update. And Tony, are you able to introduce it, please?
Yeah, very briefly, Keith, I think it's a short report. We had a meeting after the board in January. We reconstituted the subgroup. We met on the 7th of March. For my sins, I was re-elected chair on a tidal wave of apathy. No, seriously, I'm grateful for colleagues who are continuing on this. We're meeting again on the 9th of May, which is immediately after the local elections, to take stock. I and a number of colleagues are up for re-election, so I hope to be joining, but you never know. And we will then be meeting every couple of months and feeding back into the board. And I think that, and then the appendix, Chair, or the very colourful chart on page 51 sets out the work streams that are relevant, and the final 2 pages just the terms of reference. So I would ask the board to note and agree the amended terms of reference, and happy to take any questions or comments, Chair.
Thank you. If I can start by saying I'm really pleased that you've taken the task on again, Tony. So well done for that. And we'll take any other questions or comments if there are any. Goodness, I'm a bit worried about this. We're getting on far too well, but thank you again for all your effort. And thank you all that are involved in that. It's really important we keep on top of that. So we are asked, as we say, the recommendations are printed and on your screen. So are we happy to accept those as printed? Yep. Thank you very much. So we move on to the Mrn Llm update. And Sarah, I think you're going to take us through it, please.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. So just briefly taking you through the report as written. I know it is a fairly lengthy report, but the first piece of good news to note from the report is that on the 1st of February of this year, DfT announced that the A326 Waterside Improvement Scheme has been approved to progress to the next stage of development. That announcement also comes with £1.254 million worth of funding towards the cost of them developing their outline business case. So very much to be welcomed, and another good to see one of our schemes progressing. Moving on then to the main substance of the report, members will recall that at the last meeting I had just received a letter from DfT stating they were going to be undertaking a review of the Mrn and LLM programmes. That letter is included in the report pack as Appendix 1. Having spoken to DfT further after that letter, that day they clarified sort of what the purpose of the review is, what they're hoping to achieve from it, and it was very clear that one of the issues with the programme overall was that the large tail of funding, where schemes are stretching into beyond the end of the funding period, beyond March 2025. So they need to manage that, and we're seeking the help of STBs in carrying out an initial review of all schemes that were currently in the programme. DfT suggested, and I think quite rightly so, that some of the schemes may no longer be priorities, either because they've increased in cost or they can't actually be progressed in a timely manner in order to meet that start of construction by March 2025, or that they no longer fit with either the Mrn, local authorities or STB's latest objectives. Alongside this, there's been some quite significant changes in sort of government focus and policy since the programme was put together in 2019. Improvements for buses, bus priority, active travel have become much more prevalent, and DfT are very keen to see that schemes include those as part of the proposals. And also, obviously, the decarbonisation agenda has become much more to the fore as well. So DfT sought the help of STBs in undertaking the review. We sent out questionnaires to all of our scheme promoters and asked them to fill them in, giving us updated details of where their schemes are, and then carried out a review internally to review that information that was presented to us. So of the 17 schemes that were initially submitted back in 2019, 2 of them have subsequently secured funding through other routes. So the Friendly Corner scheme has been taken forward through the RIS programme by National Highways, and the A320 scheme in Surrey received HIF funding as well. So those 2 schemes can be removed from the programme. Two further schemes were identified from the information that was returned to us as no longer meeting the requirements of the Major Road Network programme, and therefore our recommendation is that these should also be removed from the current programme. The two schemes are the A249 Stockbridge Overbridge scheme in Kent. This one was actually originally part of a much larger scheme being brought forward by Kent and National Highways. National Highways are now taking forward the larger element of the scheme themselves, no longer requiring Major Road Network funding, and the sort of remnants of the scheme, the Overbridge, as a standalone scheme, it has limited benefits and delivers poor value for money, so it's not seen as still meeting the requirements of the programme. The other scheme that was problematic in that respect is the New Thames Crossing scheme to the east of Reading. This is a very, very complex scheme and suffers quite a lot from disagreement from a number of parties around what the actual scope of the scheme should be, what the scheme details are. And that has actually prevented the scheme progressing in a timely manner. And as such, it's now very, very unlikely that it could ever meet construction by March 2025. However, that one does remain a priority, just it obviously can't meet the timescales. However, for the purposes of reviewing the programme as it currently stands, again, their recommendation is that that scheme should be removed. That said, TFSC internally do hold a list of pipeline schemes in the event that there should be a further round of funding for these programmes, and we would propose obviously to keep it on our own internal list, even though it had been removed from the external programme. Of the remaining schemes, 10 of them absolutely remain strategic priorities and have also confirmed that they can start construction by March 2025. And so those 10 schemes are recommended to remain in the programme. That leaves us with 3 other schemes, which is the A31 Farnam Corridor, the A229 Bluebell Hill Junction upgrades and West Quay Road realignment in Southampton. All of these schemes absolutely remain as strategic priorities for ourselves and our constituent authorities. However, due to the size and scale of them, they are unlikely to meet the required timescales. We're very, very clear that these larger schemes need to have a route in which they can continue to be developed. And without any sort of information from the government around whether or not there will be a second round of Major Road Network funding on MRN2, if you want to sort of coin the phrase, there's no option but for these schemes to remain in the current programme. So it's our recommendation, therefore, that these schemes do remain in the programme, although we do need to acknowledge to DfT that they're unlikely to meet the required timescales. Alongside that, it would be our intention to engage with DfT in discussions around whether or not there were to be a separate Major Road Network 2 funding programme, and if so, whether there was a possibility for schemes to be developed in one funding period for construction in another, which would obviously mirror the process that happens with the roads investment strategy that National Highways undertake. So the recommendations for the schemes that remain on the priority list are included as Appendix 3. Appendix 2 within the report gives information on the assessment that was taken out, and we propose that we also submit that to government to help them when they're looking at the programme as well, so they know what our view is on all the various elements of the scheme. Lastly, just to say that for schemes that do remain within the programme, it's absolutely imperative that scheme promoters keep the Department for Transport up to date. Obviously, the Department for Transport are trying to manage a national programme with many, many different schemes, and they need to have up-to-date information. So we would just ask that the promoters of the schemes that do remain in the programme do continue to engage with DfT and keep them up to date with where their schemes are. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Sarah. Tony, you want to come in, please?
Yes, Chair, thanks, and thanks for the introduction. I don't have any problem with the recommendations as such, because they obviously recognise the reality on the ground, but I would ask for some skillful wordsmithing, which I'm about to propose around the New Thames Crossing, which is one of the 2 items that clearly is not going to be or could not be delivered within the time scale, but all the Berkshire authorities still support the scheme. There is strong local support for the scheme. The issue is the difficulties with Oxfordshire and South Oxfordshire. And I would be dropped into the Thames by the 2 relevant MPs, namely Theresa May and Matt Rodder, if I acquiesced in anything that seemed to end support for the scheme. So whilst happy with, well, not happy, whilst recognising the reality that this can't be submitted to the DFT in the context of the current MRN and large local major schemes. Should there be the opportunity in the future, we are still working locally to try and get some sort of agreement with Oxfordshire. So it is not a dead scheme as far as we're concerned. So could I propose a slight addendum that reads something along the lines of the following, Chair, that we recognise a new Thames crossing scheme east of Reading cannot be delivered in the timescales set out in the current MRN/LLM programme. However, the scheme has potential economic and connectivity benefits and should be considered again if there is a subsequent MRN/LLM programme. And this is obviously incumbent on further scheme development by the promoters, which is Wokingham and Reading in this case, and obviously the LEP and the Berkshire Transport Board in support as well. So if I could ask for that to be included, Chair, it would avoid my early demise when I next report back to the relevant Berkshire authorities. So that's what that would be my request, Chair. Unless you want to throw me to the wolves and anyway. Thank you, Rob.
I'm sure your colleagues wouldn't want to be doing that. I'm sure that will get support. We'll come back to it in a moment. I've got Rupert. Did you want to talk on that? Because I've got Dan next.
Yeah, I think Tony's made the point well that the current MRN LLM timescale is quite challenging, but that the scheme that he's identified remains a local priority. It does have something. It is economically, it will have economic benefits, and I think there's a recognition that look, if the DFT develop an MRM program, you'd want to be back in the running. So I think that the recommendation that you make, subject to the board's view, is a sensible one under the circumstances. I think it's quite unique in that respect.
Thank you, Dan.
Thanks, Keith. Yeah, I mean, just speaking on behalf of Kent, I think we're happy with the recommendations, but I did just want to flag one point relating to the Bluebell Hill project. Yeah, that is linked to the Lower Thames Crossing mega project, as you know, and we have to do the changes at Bluebell Hill to make the Lower Thames Crossing project viable. And I suppose there's a little bit of frustration from our side vis-a-vis Department for Transport, how we felt they sort of moved the goalpost on that one, because we're ready to develop the scheme and we've never been sort of told a 2025 timeline. And to be honest, we feel like they're the ones who need to enable that timeline to happen. And then obviously it comes out that, in order for that project to be kind of prioritised, as it were, you need to be able to do things in time for 2025. But it's now hard to hit that, but we feel like that's nothing to do with us, as it were. So we've kind of been deprioritised, we feel, just by their own maybe absence of communication on some of this. But yeah, obviously in terms of how you've expressed 4.13, you've made a strong kind of commitment in there to keep going with that, and I just wanted the team to sort of note that is important for us. It's got to happen, and if DFT don't allow us to make that happen, then the Lower Thames Crossing is just going to get even more delayed, and we believe they want that as well. Thanks.
Thank you. We'll tidy that up at the end, I'm sure. Dan, Colin, followed by Rob.
Microphone off, sorry about that, and sorry for coming back late, had a meeting in between to fit in. A22 corridor package is marked in all places as the East Sussex package, and yet it was always the intention to bring Junction 6 into this as part of the package as well, because it's still a priority. Tandridge are still working with the local planning inspectorate to deliver their local plan. And I just think I don't know where the East Sussex element of it is from a delivery point of view, but I think cutting off that is will not be welcomed.
Do you want to deal with that bit, Rupert, and Dan?
I mean, the A22 MRM bits in East Sussex are well developed. Sarah, I think I'm right in saying that there isn't, as far as I understand it, I don't think there's a scheme for that junction, so it wouldn't be deliverable within the Mrn Llm timetable.
Yeah, that's right. The A22 obviously goes through East Sussex and also through up into Surrey, and there's separate schemes within the different authorities. The A22 part in East Sussex is further developed. The A22 part in Surrey currently sits as one of those pipeline schemes within the CFSE list, if you like, for consideration at a later date when it's got to the point where we have more details. Okay,
they have got some idea of plans of what to do with Junction 6 actually, because they've just had a transport firm do some work on that, but obviously they haven't submitted them to you, and I'll try and find out where that is.
Thanks, Colin. Yeah. Thank you, Sarah. Rob?
Yeah, just quickly, first of all, extremely pleased on the funding for the A326, and well done to all the team on that. I just want to make a point on grant streams and funding and timing. It's sort of the point Dan made as well. It's always difficult, isn't it, when you're having to watch the clock. And I know this has come under in terms of the lets time and time again. Now, you've got to have some sort of deadline, clearly in funding streams, you can't go on forever. But it is frustrating when you get really good schemes that can't quite make the timing, and what happens to that. I know you spoke about potentially it rolling into another year, but there needs to be a discussion with DfT, what happens to those schemes, because they literally get taken off, and then you almost got to start again. I know you can keep them rolling, but and I mentioned earlier about joining up the dots. Some of these schemes add value to other schemes, just because they can't actually be done quite within that timescale. So I think it's really frustrating, and I take Dan's point there and the other points that are made on that. And it's worth having a discussion with DfT how that can maybe be addressed in the future. And the last very quick point, having spent many years cleaning up the water quality of the Thames, it'd be a great shame to drop Tony in right now and do it. And
sorry.
Bad boy.
Sorry, I forgot I hadn't muted. Yeah. Rupert.
Yeah, thanks, Keith. Just on Councillor Humbley's point, it's a really important one actually around the pipeline of schemes. It's a perennial problem for promoters. The money tap comes on, it goes off, comes on again a few years later. We are hopeful that the capacity and capability work stream that the DfT have developed and provided some funding to us for has some longevity, so that we can start to build with our partners a proper pipeline so that we avoid the problems that you've described. The DfT seem willing to approach it that way and keen to provide funding to enable that to happen. So we're just setting out how that might work so that we can avoid the very problem that you've just described. It's going to take a while to get that pipeline going, but once it's there, we want to hang on to it so that when these funding opportunities come, be it MRN or HIF or LLM, we're in a place where we can go, yes, these are developed, let's push them through. So we avoid these conversations about, is it going to make the window, is it not, and all the rest of it. So I remain hopeful.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add very quickly, Chairman, is you've got to make sure you have that revenue funding to be able to do that work, to make sure you have that pipeline sat there to take advantage of it. It's more, Rupert, the point about sometimes the link with other schemes, I think, is a point we don't want to miss.
Yeah. Yeah, more generally, I think you're right. Just the joining up of dots is always very difficult, but something we need to try and do. Are there any other comments or questions? No. So with Tony's amendment with regards to his particular scheme, are we happy to approve the recommendations as printed?
Yeah. Yes.
Good. Thank you very much. And thank you, Sarah. We move on to agenda item 9, which is DfT STB priority work streams. And Mark, I think you're going to take us through this, please.
Yeah, just quickly, Chair, this is an update report. We reported in on this item at the last meeting, just to update the board about the procurement activity that's now underway to take forward the funding that we were awarded by the DfT to undertake some work under 4 work streams, which are firstly the development of electric vehicle infrastructure strategy across the region. We were awarded £100,000 to take that work forward. Procurement activity is underway, currently developing a brief for that work. Secondly, we have the local capability and capacity work, where we bid for 200,000, we're awarded 300,000. And as the board will remember, this work is to primarily to assist in improving the capability of local transport authorities where they need it in terms of LTP delivery, EV infrastructure charging rollout, or decarbonisation potentially. And procurement work on this has commenced last week, with a request for quotes going out for the first stage of that work. Thirdly, Bus Back Better, where we were awarded £300,000. This is a joint proposal, to be clear, with Transport East and England's Economic Heartlands. TFSE is leading this, and again, a brief is being prepared to go out to tender to procure that work. That should be issued mid-April. And then lastly, the 4th work stream was decarbonisation, where there are 2 pieces of work. One, again, a joint bid with Transport East and England's Economic Heartlands, which England's Economic Heartlands are leading, with the main output from that work being a tool to help local transport authorities assess the potential decarbonisation impacts of the development of their local transport plans. So England's Economic Heartlands leading on that. There's also a joint 7 STB piece of work, a smaller piece of work, which is £70,000 in value, to try and coalesce all of the desktop research that's been done to date on working out what the decarbonisation impacts are of various different interventions. So happy to take, that's just a very brief update on where we are. Happy to take any questions about any of the specifics.
Thank you, Mark. Any questions or comments from Mark? No? Okay. Ian.
Thank you, Keith. Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on the Bus Back Better element of the programme. I would hope that that is going to be addressing particularly the opportunities for potentially demand-led response to buses in rural areas. And it's a bit of a ticklish area, this, because I'm aware that sort of bus use has declined during the lockdown period. And I'm not quite sure what the current status is now in terms of its return, but I think there have been subsidies going to bus companies. There's an element of chicken and egg here, of course, isn't there? With you know, bus routes decline, then because of lower use, then of course there is lower use still. So I'm hoping that the brief for the consultants will be looking at the opportunities for some managed interventions that will boost bus use in a targeted way, particularly in rural areas.
I think that bus may have left, but Rupert will tell us, because our Bus Back Better bids are all in. Rupert?
Yeah, well, so all the local authorities submit a bus service improvement plan, 79, I think, in all. There are some challenges around funding. So the aspiration is greater, I think, than the funding available. And I think, you know, the risk is, the point you're making is well made around rural bus connectivity. I suppose the risk is that we look at all the shiny bus priority measures in urban areas and, you know, at the risk of leaving rural communities behind. And I know a number of BSIPs are trying, bus service improvement plans, try to address that through digital demand responsive transport and the like. It's just not as shiny as bus priority measures. But I know that my rural colleagues or colleagues that have those rural hinterland, you know, will be pushing hard to make sure that demand responsive travel is in. I think authorities are still waiting to hear the outcome of funding for their BSIPs, and of course that will drive ultimately what needs to be done.
Yeah,
thank you. Any other comments or questions? No. So again, you've got the recommendations on the screen. Are we happy to agree those? Thank you. Right. So we move on to item 10, which is area study progress. And Sarah, I think it's you again, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, I will go very briefly through this. Obviously, we've heard quite a lot about the area studies in the earlier meeting, so you should know where we are. The area studies work is coming to a conclusion. Just to say, though, we are still very much in the writing up phase. There are a lot of documents that are being written. I think there's going to be around 11 different reports coming out of the area studies collectively, so that's why we're not quite there yet. We're finishing off, although the actual sort of technical work behind it is nearly there. There is an error in the report. I've just noticed in paragraph 4.2 it says that 5 thematic chapters are going to be prepared. That's actually now 6. We've added a 6th chapter around Bus Back Better, recognising that it's a key government priority alongside strategic cycling, strategic highways, levelling up, decarbonisation and rail. In terms of stakeholder engagement that we've been undertaking, we've had a number of engagement sessions with districts and borough councillors and officers, and also MPs as well. We've also held the last area study forum. We combined it to make all 5 forums into one for efficiency, and so people could hear everything. And we've also held the last meeting of the working group, which is the technical officers from our constituent authorities and partner organisations such as National Highways Network, Rail, South Wales National Park, etc. So very, very grateful for all the very detailed technical input that the officers have given us, and it's really helped us along the way. Obviously still a bit of tidying up to do with the reports that will come out of it, but we are very nearly there with the area studies.
Thank you, Sarah. Any questions or comments? Another good piece of work that's almost completed, so well done. We need to agree the recommendation as printed. Are we happy to do that? Yeah. Thank you very much. So we come to 11, which is the Strategic Investment Plan Progress Update. Rachel, please.
Thank you, Chair. This is a very brief update just to keep board members updated on the progress with the Strategic Investment Plan. And as board members are aware, we appointed a consortium of STEER and KPMG to lead on the development of the Strategic Investment Plan in September last year. The intention is that the final SIP will be brought to the Partnership Board for approval in March 2023, and we are intending to run a public consultation from June to September of this year. In terms of the progress that's been made to date, things are starting to progress at speed now, and things are really starting to ramp up. Paragraph 3.4 sets out the 5-stage approach that we've developed to producing the SIP, and we've completed stage A and stage B, which is mobilisation and development of the SIP background, and we've moved into stage C, which is SIP development, and this runs through until June this year when the draft SIP is presented to the Partnership Board. Initial work is underway on the development of the strategic narrative that will make the case for investment in the South East, and we've held a number of engagement sessions to help shape that emerging narrative. We're also at the point of bringing in the emerging findings from the area studies and starting to present the technical core of the document as well. And KPMG have recently started the funding and financing element of the SIP, which is it's progressing well, and I think that's something that board members will look forward to hearing about at their next update. The intention is that the draft SIP will be presented to the board for sign-off in June of this year, and then we will launch the consultation. With regard to the consultation, as mentioned at the last board meeting, we have appointed an organisation called ECF, which stands for Engage, Consult, Facilitate, in January of this year to work closely with STEER and KPMG to develop the consultation approach. The inception meeting was held on the 24th of February, and initial work is focusing on stakeholder mapping, identifying the key lines of inquiry, and starting to develop the questions and tools that will be utilised through the engagement hub. We are intending to bring the ECF team along to the Partnership Board meeting in June to present the consultation approach. But if board members agree to the extraordinary board meeting that is going to be proposed in May, we would bring the ECF team along earlier so that they could share their initial findings and ideas with the board. Paragraph 4.6 highlights that we are planning a launch event for the SIP, and that's scheduled for the 5th of July at G Live in Guildford. We're intending that the event would be attended by around about 200 senior stakeholder representatives. Work is underway to develop a programme, but I'm really pleased to say that Baroness Vere has already accepted an invitation to provide the keynote at that event. Board members will be receiving a save the date very shortly, and then further details will follow in due course. We will then be putting in place a range of other engagement events, details of which are being confirmed, and an engagement plan will be presented to the Partnership Board at the next meeting. Section 5 sets out the budget implications. These are very much as previously presented to the board. The contract value for the SIP is £150,000. That was included in the DFT grant for 21-22, and we will be carrying forward the underspend from this year to next year to finalise that piece of work. We are anticipating that there will be some additional budget required to finalise the SIP, including design and publication of the final version, and to ensure that the consultation process that we deliver is to a really high standard. The engagement specialist, that piece of work at the minute is coming in just under £25,000, slightly higher than originally anticipated as the scope of the work has expanded. And again, we will be looking at how we progress that work on the engagement specialist to make sure that the surrounding work around the consultation enables us to deliver a really good consultation for our residents and key stakeholders. The Partnership Board are recommended to note the progress to date.
Thank you, Rachel. Again, we are moving forward at quite a pace. Are there any questions or comments on what you've just heard and read? No? Well, thanks again. So we're asked to, well, I won't read it. We will note the recommendation as printed.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So we're now on to agenda item 12, which is technical progress update. And Mark, I think you're going to introduce this, please.
Yes, Chair, thank you very much. Yes, so the report just updates the board on 3 areas of technical work that we have ongoing that we haven't heard about in the rest of the meeting. It's the Bus Back Better work that we commissioned, and this was very much focused on developing an evidence base to support the development of local transport authorities' BSIPs in terms of setting out what the potential for buses are in terms of their ability to carry more passengers across a wider part of the geography, and looking at some of the costs and revenues associated with that. On the future mobility work, as the board will remember, we've been trying to commission WSP, who undertook the strategy, which the board agreed in October to take forward the action plan. We've had some contractual issues sort of bogging that down, but I can report that finally those have been sorted out. So we're in a position to commission WSP to start developing some of the actions that were set out in the action plan that accompanied the strategy. And also, obviously, now we have the announcement about our CSR funding. We'll be looking to see how we can take that work forward further into the future, potentially using some of the resource that we've now we now have available to us. Lastly, on decarbonisation, we have some technical work ongoing to identify some decarbonisation trajectories for the southeast, and also that work will be looking at assessing the impact of the different interventions that are available to local transport authorities to drive forward decarbonisation. That work is underway and is progressing well, and we'll be looking to report back into the board at the next meeting on progress on that particularly, but also on the other 2 areas of work that I've highlighted. So happy to take any questions about the specifics of any of those 3 areas of work.
Thank you, Mark. Questions, comments? Dan.
Thanks, Keith. I was just going to ask Mark about the mobility study, the bus study, and decarbonisation studies. Whether we'd see anything before the June board meeting in any of those cases, or whether it's going to be a big bang with lots of material to take in June.
The answer to that question is yes, there will be a technical report that will be circulated primarily initially for officer consumption, but I'd be looking to bring that update. We can provide, now we've got the additional board meeting in May, I can provide a further update there, but there is a technical report that we're about to release to the Transport Strategy Working Group for their comments. So if you would like to see a copy of that early doors, if you like, to see what sort of recommendations are coming from that, happy to maybe ask Joe Ratcliffe to liaise with you to supply you with a copy of that once he's seen it, if that would be helpful.
Yeah, that would be great. Thanks, Mark. I'm particularly thinking with my bus hat on that might be useful, because we're kind of waiting for the BSIP announcements, the funding announcements, and of course once that's made, then we've got to try and prioritise those funds, and if there are some early outputs from that bit of work that you commissioned, that might help us. But yes, same would apply with the other two as well. So yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Okay, so is that, Mark, just testing, that's a general, if we want to get further information, talk to the officer team, and they should be able to share that information at the appropriate time, yeah?
Yes, yeah, if the board have any questions about any of the 3 items, then yes, just come directly to me with any specific queries. Great,
thank you very much for that. No other comments, so are we happy to, Ian? Yeah. Sorry, Ian's there.
Quick question, Keith, with the decarbonisation, there's a proposal that there'll be proposals for each authority. What authorities are actually being covered? Is it just the 3 main highway authorities here, or what, that Steer will be producing, or will it be going to a finer grain than that?
Yes, the work covers the whole of the southeast region, and for most of it, we'll be able to disaggregate the information down to each of the 16 local transport authorities.
Sorry, sorry, I was thinking of 3 relating to the park. There are of course 16 relating to TFSE.
Yeah.
Would it be possible to get cookie cutting to other areas? I'm thinking here of protected landscapes, and in particular the national park. Do you know if that's feasible?
I don't know if that's feasible within given that the data that's generated is generated at a local transport authority, so our ability to quite segment in that way, I think, might be challenging with the budget. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it might take some additional resource to do that, to carve the territory up in a slightly different way.
Yeah. Okay. Well, be interesting to see when the figures come out.
Okay. Thank you. So we'll note as on the screen. Yeah. Thank you very much. Agenda item 13, comms and stakeholder engagement. Holly, please.
Thank you. So the purpose of this report is to update you on comms and engagement activity since the end of January. You have already heard updates on much of the comms and engagement activity through other presentations that we've had already this morning. But to summarise, our pre-SIP engagement exercises have now concluded with presentations on emerging outputs from the area studies delivered to a range of stakeholders between November and March. As a team, we've arranged and delivered 23 targeted engagement sessions. 15 of these were for constituent authorities and board members, 3 were for district and borough members and officers, and 5 were for MPs. Across these sessions, we've met with over 160 individuals, comprising of 15 MPs or their representatives, 37 senior local politicians and 86 officers, so really wide-reaching engagement there. Included within that series of events was the Parliamentary Reception, which has already been mentioned. This event was supported by a number of board members and attended by MPs from across the region, and we're really grateful for your support in promoting the event beforehand and to those that were able to attend and support on the day. At the previous board meeting, you gave approval to our freight logistics and gateway strategy, and since then we have been developing our plans to formally launch this at the ITT Hub event in May. Our attendance at this event and the launch of the freight strategy will be promoted via a video interview with featuring Mark, and a Lunch with Leon Daniels podcast featuring Rupert, as well as a wider roundtable discussion with industry experts and using the opportunity to encourage private sector sign up to our Freight Forum, which we hope to relaunch. Looking more widely at our engagement activity, we have recently met with universities where discussion with the impacts of COVID-19 on staff and student travel. The next meeting of the universities will be on the 1st of July and will cover the SIP consultation and possibly something on electric vehicle infrastructure, with presentations from our own technical team and the University of Surrey. Communications and Stakeholder Engagement Group also met last in February and were updated on progress to date, and they continue to be extremely supportive, and the meetings are providing to be mutually beneficial to all participants, allowing an opportunity for us to update each other on work of interest and network as well, which has been really helpful. The next meeting is on the 31st of March, and at this meeting we're hoping to share more details of our communications and engagement plan as we move towards consultation on the SIP, and we'll be looking to enlist their active support. We've got a couple of upcoming events to mention. So I've already mentioned it once, the ITT Hub on the 11th and 12th of May. We'll be attending this and using it to launch the Freight, Logistics and Gateway strategy. Then we've also got the Joint STB conference on the 26th of May. As you'll be aware, this is the first national joint STB event hosted at the Vox in Birmingham. The programme has been developed further now and can be viewed on the event website. If you haven't already signed up to attend and would like to, we would encourage you to register as soon as possible. And then finally, as we look towards engagement around our SIP consultation, we've now got a number of events diarised to launch and promote the consultation to key stakeholder groups. So if I can just quickly pop a slide up on the screen just to demonstrate to you what we have got coming up. Here we go. So the Digital First consultation will launch on the 20th of June. This will be solely online, though we're working with our engagement specialists to make sure it can be made available in other formats as required. And the consultation itself will be hosted on an all-in-one digital community engagement platform called Engagement HQ, which some of you may be familiar with. As some of you will be aware, we've been speaking to MPs through our recent engagement sessions and taking on feedback that we've received from them. We have now booked, with the support of Sally Ann Hart, the MP for Hastings and Rye, we've booked the Attlee Suite at Portcullis House to host a parliamentary reception on the 22nd of June. The plan for this event is for it to run from 9 till 11 AM, with time at the beginning of the session for MPs to arrive and look and discuss at the more localised information within the SIP, before receiving a short presentation on the regional investment plan, followed by a Q&A. As we are hosting this engagement event just before Prime Minister questions, we hope that there will be more MPs at the House of Commons and able to attend or send a representative from their office. And as I've mentioned, this was something that was suggested by MPs themselves. So we hope that, you know, that this will get a few more people along. Then following that, on the 5th of July, we've got Connecting the South East, a bold and ambitious plan. That will be our main consultation event at G Live in Guildford. It will celebrate the launch of the consultation and will be aimed at around 200 senior stakeholders and feature an array of speakers. And as Rachel's mentioned, Baroness Veer will also be invited as a keynote speaker and has accepted that invitation. And then on the 11th and 12th of July, we'll also be running 2 virtual webinar sessions that will deliver a presentation on the SIP and how people can engage with it. And of course, in addition to these events, the consultation will be promoted by a wide-reaching communications and marketing campaign using not only our own channels, but we also hope those of our constituent authorities and partners too. So we will be discussing that with the Comms and Engagement Group and looking for your support. We'll also be looking to do some paid digital advertising to complement this and ensure that we are able to garner responses from a wide range of stakeholders from across the region. We'll be circulating your invitations to these events over the next few days, and we really do hope that you will be able to join us. In addition to your attendance at these events, where you can, we would also ask for your ongoing support in promoting these events and our work, particularly to your MPs. And we just wanted to say now, if there is anything that you need from us to support conversations that you might want to have with MPs, then please let us know, and we'd be happy to assist and provide additional information to help support those conversations. That's it from me.
Thank you, Holly. Questions or comments? Can I just say that an awful lot of work's gone into consultation again, and it really was good to get some feedback from one of the MPs, because we haven't met as many MPs as we want. Rob has done another session in Portcullis, and so any help you can get to give us to get our MPs geared up and ready for this SIP launch, we would very much appreciate. So let's hope that we can get a better turnout in the Attlee Suite on Prime Minister Questions Days. So who knows? We might be more attractive than Prime Minister, but you never know. We are trying, as you can say. Someone's always said that.
Yeah.
Keith, I just thanks to the team for the support they've given me on those meetings. And I'm going to repeat what I said. If there is something that we can have, almost like infographics or just data on, that they can literally pick up and put all some of that data about the dates on there as well.
Yeah.
And it's in front of them. I can literally hand it to them if that's all right. Thanks.
Yep. Good stuff. Thank you very much. So we have the recommendations on screen. Are we happy to agree those? Thank you. So Jeff, it's over to you. Transport Forum update, please.
Yeah, thanks. Got a few things to report. Last meeting was on the 8th of March. There was more than 35 people involved in the meeting, which was good attendance. It's very clear that actually Teams is very good for us because people are prepared to join the meeting for a couple of hours, but don't have to give up the whole day to travel a long distance to go there. So that's been very useful. Generally, the forum continues to be seen by attendees as an important communication link with its key stakeholders. Obviously, there are some people who come along who have got a very strong interest in one aspect of transport rather than the whole picture. So sometimes we're up talking in very broad terms, and sometimes we're down in amongst the weeds of looking at the details of some issues. But that's understandable. Most people, well, all the people that come to the forum think it remains a good way to keep interesting bodies informed of developments and plans, which is terrific. That's all part of the reason for doing it. It was quite interesting when we asked for what people wanted to discuss at forthcoming meetings. You can start with the detailed area where there was interest in meetings to discuss active travel and sustainable transport and that sort of thing at one end. And at the other end, something I mentioned in the earlier meeting, some of them wanted to hear more about the connection or perhaps disconnection between transport and land use planning that we talked about earlier. So we continue to hold these meetings. Those that attend, fortunately, seem to think they are helpful and give them a chance to raise issues that they think are important. And we will carry on doing that and fitting in with what other things are going on because of all of the SIP and other things that are being reported. So that's all.
Thank you, Jeff, and a genuine thank you. I mean, I think we shouldn't underestimate the breadth of engagement that goes on through the forum. So, the people there that we wouldn't talk to any other way. So well done, Rob.
Yeah, just quickly, Jeff, in terms of, I know you have reps from the operators and specifically on the buses. I don't know how many you have. I meet the 3 or 4 MDs of the major bus companies in Hampshire on a fairly regular basis. And what has surprised me is how much information, commercial information, they're prepared to share with each other because they are acting as one. And I'm just wondering whether you might have an opportunity to invite, I don't know how many you have, but maybe more together at various meetings in specific areas.
Yeah, it's a good idea, Rob. I've just written it down. Thank you.
Are there any other comments or questions? Again, thanks again, Jeff. Agenda item 15, which is responses to consultation. Rupert, can you take us through this?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. So there's 4 responses to consultations. National Infrastructure Commission 1, just a couple of points to draw your attention to there. One is, we recognise the importance of demand management in any sort of future, congestion model, and we do talk about the Transport Select Committee's report into road user charging and road pricing. So, the sense that there's almost, as the Select Committee said, there's almost an inevitability. We know this gap, this funding gap, revenue gap for Treasury is coming down the line. So we do make mention of that in there. Just want to draw that to your attention. And then there's a response to Surrey's place ambition, which I think is really positive. They've had regard to the strategy in developing that, and it feels like they're in a really, thinking is in a good place. Specific consultation response on the A27 Arundel bypass, and we're just recognising that we understand the need for a scheme there. We're agnostic on alignment and all the rest of it, but the A27, as we've discussed previously, is an important corridor. And then the final one is the House of Lords Built Environment Committee. So it's call for evidence on public transport in towns and cities. Just a couple of points to flag there. We've mentioned land use planning and transport planning a couple of times. We are flagging that in our evidence. We think that's important. And again, the road pricing element as well, on the back of the Select Committee report, we think it would be wrong of us not to make mention of that in terms of demand management. So those are the four there that we, subject to your agreement, we will ratify or formalise with the people have asked for our view. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments or questions? Okay, no, we'll agree those as printed. Again, thank you. There's quite a lot of activity there. So we come to any other business. Shall we start with Rupert with the proposed additional board meeting, which is scheduled for Monday, the 9th of May, 2 till 4? Is that?
So, yeah, thank you, Chairman. We're sort of we've touted this a couple of times during the session. So our original thinking is that there's quite a gap between now and June. The June meeting is quite a busy meeting. It's the AGM as well as other business, and we think that it's sensible not to have such a gap given the importance of the SIP, that we hold an extraordinary board meeting so that we can demonstrate how your comments you've had are being taken account of in the SIP development, the SIP narrative. And then we also mentioned that because of us receiving literally a couple of hours ago our funding settlement, it is important that we set a budget, or the board sets a budget. We would propose to do that virtually, i.e. by email, to enable us to make an April the 1st start. But we think we could also use that 9th of May board meeting to, in effect, ratify the budget. And there'd be a couple of other pieces of business that we bring forward to that board meeting. So it's principally around there being a long gap between now and June, and we think that this is evolving, and we want to make sure that you're fully understand where we are.
Thank you. Ian, you've got your hand up.
Yes, apologies, Keith. I was half asleep, but I just wanted to let you know that the South Downs Authority, National Park Authority members last week objected strongly to the proposals on the A27 south of Arundel, largely on the basis that the National Highways have produced insufficient information. So there's a lot we don't know about, but we are particularly concerned about the proposed viaduct, which is in the proposals for the A27, and a lack of detail on that, and wonder whether TFSE might wish to sort of strengthen or revise its responses on that to suggest perhaps a competition in terms of the visual impact of the viaduct, and also its environmental implications, because it's quite a critical major piece of construction associated with the new highway, and it'd be good to get the National Highways to concentrate their minds on this. and look for a really high quality solution. The other issue associated with that is we'd also like to see sort of further detail on the detrunking of the existing A27 in that area and how that might be mitigated and areas associated with it restored in terms of environmental impact and impact on the communities affected.
Rupert, do you want to answer?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I think, I mean, the broad point in the consultation response is that it restates our support for an improvement scheme at Arundel, i.e. it recognises the challenges there, but we're not offering a view on, how the scheme, should mitigate any impacts. I mean, this will end up in a DCO, and it would be for an inspector to determine whether or not it's acceptable in landscape, environmental and other terms. So I don't think it's really within our remit, or it's not. I don't believe it's appropriate for TFSC to do as you suggested, Ian, other than recognise that any scheme, be that road or rail, needs to ensure it can satisfy environmental, social, and those environmental, social, and economic criteria, and for a planning inspector to determine whether it's acceptable in planning and landscape visual implications.
I just wonder whether that might fit in with the TFSE's strategic objectives in terms of looking for certainly new road schemes to make a positive impact on the environment, and your voice would be welcomed in that respect.
I think I understand the points you're making. I think that's all we'd ever do, is comment on whether or not something looked right or was environmentally sound. Given the nature of infrastructure development that's proposed in the SIP, I suppose it opens the Pandora's box of that's what we would do. And I think there are other organisations far better placed to offer views on whether or not it's suitable in planning terms.
Hear what you say.
Tony.
Chair, for those of us who've got to go, could we agree what time on the 9th? Because as I indicated earlier, we've got the governance subgroup is meeting at 1. Yeah. So it would be helpful to have the board meeting either before or after that.
I did suggest it was 2 o'clock until 4 o'clock.
Yeah, that's fine. Could we confirm that then?
Yeah.
Are we happy to agree this, board?
It's on the screen now, Tony.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I realise that, but we head off into a road scheme as soon as
that
came up, so I didn't want to
no, we got deflected back into a road scheme, but that's fine. Sorry, Tony. Can we all agree what's on the screen now, please? Yeah. Take that as a yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I now have to go. Thank you.
And Tony, thanks again for your help today. That's
okay.
Really great.
Bye to everybody.
Okay. So the other issue I just want to raise is that the AGM on the 13th of June, we said we'd try and have an in-person meeting for the AGM. There's still a major problem in getting a venue around Gatwick. All of the hotels are still being used for quarantine or other purposes. And so it looks like we may end up in London, probably LGA, possibly in LGA. But just want to really give you a heads up that that's what the current thinking is. I do think it is important once a year at least to meet. And so we'll let you know as that progresses. If anyone's got a really good reason why we shouldn't consider it, now's the time to shout. No shouting, that's good. Are there any other business from any of the board members that you want to raise? Thank you. Well, thank you all, and Andy, thank you for any help you may or may not have given to getting our letter today, but we really do appreciate it. So, well done.
You're very welcome. It's good to see it. Good to see it issued at last, wasn't it?
Yeah. Good.
And with that, if there's nothing else to add, I look forward to seeing you on the 9th of May at 2 o'clock.
Yep.
Thank you all very much. Cheers.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.